Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, can you see the screen that I have shared? Is it visible?
क्या कर रहे हैं?
Sir, मैंने जो screen share किया है, is it visible?
वो नहीं कर रही है पूरी.
Hello, sir, I cannot hear you.
मैम ब्लैक ब्लैक पूरा ब्लैक शो कर रहा है.
Okay, I'll do that.
यस मैम. ओके ओके.
Okay, sir, it's visible now, right?
यस 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 मैम यस.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first revision session of dystopian writings. So, so this first session will be on Unit 1, that is The Last Man by Mary Shelley. Okay, so before we start with the uh, novel, I'll just give a little bit of explanation or introduction to what dystopia is, what a dystopian fiction is all about, and what are the different characteristics of dystopian fiction. Right. So sorry. Okay. So dystopia, the word dystopia is the opposite of the term utopia, right? Utopia was a term that was coined by Thomas More. Uh, it was about an ideal society on a fictional island. And it is used to describe a place that is too good to be true and which is devoid of any conflict, right? So opposite to that is the term dystopia. And it was John Stuart Mill, who was an English professor and an economist who made a speech in the House of the Commons and used the term dystopia for the very first time to describe something that is too bad to be practicable, right? So this was the first public usage of the term dystopia. So dystopias are any hypothetical societies usually set in future or near future where the population faces some kind of disastrous political, societal, technological, religious, or environmental situations, right? So accordingly, what would be a dystopian fiction? So a dystopian fiction would uh, usually depict something, a very pessimistic future uh, that features some kind of an extreme version of the current society, right? And the genre is very broad, and it works can range from dystopian science fiction to apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic novels, right? And dystopian writings, they attempt to challenge readers to reflect on their current social, environmental, technological, and political situations. And they are often allegorical, didactic, and they tend to warn us about the worst aspects of our potential futures. So the genre, what it does is it invites us to think about our current, or current or historical actions or our decisions that might, to shape the future, and it urges us to make different, different choices. So dystopian fiction can help us identify the symptoms of an ailing society, inspiring us to take action to, shape a better world, giving us the courage to act, and also giving us hope. And and so whether these warnings or prophecies will come true, it is up to us, right? So by reading this fiction, we may be encouraged to work towards a future uh, that is, you know, opposite to the uh, to a society, to a future or a society that is often projected in dystopian fiction. And also it helps us to question the status quo and to strive for a more utopian society, right? So essentially dystopian fiction critically analyzes the current sociological and political trends and other issue that we're dealing with, and then extrapolating them into the future, and making us think what kind of future do we want and what can we do to achieve them. So, some characteristic of dystopian fiction. Uh, so dystopian fiction would often be characterized by pessimistic tone and less than ideal situations, right? There will often be a control by a ruling power or government, and the levels of control are usually very, oppressive and, enforced in a very dehumanizing ways. There is systematic surveillance, restriction of information, extensive use of, uh, propaganda, resulting in population living in fear or even, ignorant bliss, right, of their lack of freedom. They won't even realize that, they don't have freedom, right? A society, the dystopian society would be, the government would make the society in such a way, the government or any ruling, power will make the society think that they are actually living in a utopian society, right, when in a reality it is a dystopian society, right? And also in dystopian futures, technology is seldom depicted as a tool for enhancing human existence or, making tasks easier. Instead, technology is harnessed to exert, you know greater levels of, control over the population. Also, science and technology are often portrayed as, being weaponized in their use of, genetic manipulation or behavioral modification, mass surveillance, and other types of extreme control of human population, right? And also another important feature of dystopian fiction is conformity, right? Any individuality and freedom of expression or thoughts are strictly monitored, censored, or prohibited in any dystopian futures. Another aspect that is tied to the theme of conformity is the suppression of creativity. Uh, and another thing is the destruction of natural world, right? It destruction of natural world is another common theme, right? So post apocalyptic futures, when where an extinction event has been created by, a kind of maybe a natural disaster, a war, or misuse of technology, as we see in the third unit, right, in Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, right? So these are some characteristic features or elements of a dystopian fiction. Okay, so the first novel in our unit is The Last Man by Mary Shelley, right? So it was published in the year 1826. And we know that the novel is about survival and isolation in the midst of a plague. And it is often regarded as the first dystopian novel. And it also holds, an even greater significance in today's, COVID-19 context, right? And also, okay, and also, as I have just mentioned, right, dystopian fiction, it's always about, about the current anxieties or social problems in the present contemporary society, and then extrapolating it, or, projecting all those anxieties into the future, right? So now we need to know what was the context or the background against which Mary Shelley was writing The Last Man, right? So we know that 1826 is a late romantic period, right? So we know romanticism was an artistic movement, from late 18th to mid 19th century in Western civilization. And romanticism embraced subjectivity, imagination, as opposed to the rationality and order of classicism. And romanticism also celebrated nature and emphasized emotion over reason, right? Uh, so in The Last Man, Mary Shelley adopts the romantic style to depict the character's emotion and challenges, uh, and also in her description of the natural world. So I just want to flag that here. I will delve more into the romantic, style of writing later as we discuss the themes of the Last Man. But we know that it was written in the romantic period, and so Mary Shelley has adopted this romantic style of writing, in her novel, right? And also, late 19th century, right? 19th century uh, is the time when there was industrial revolution in England, right? So the industrial revolution transformed the 19th century England, leading to a significant migration of people from the rural areas to cities. And by around 1850, half of the population lived in urban areas, uh, often resulting in overcrowding and poor living conditions, due to inadequate housing, sanitation, and pollution, right? And so it is against this backdrop of overcrowded cities and frequent outbreaks of disease that Mary Shelley conceived of an epidemic, right? That an epidemic so severe that it escalated into an pandemic, and that eventually left just one survivor, right? That is Lionel Verdi. Um, and also, as I've mentioned, right, dystopian fiction highlights the social context or the circumstances of the author, and also reflect the flaws, problems, and anxieties of the society, right? So what all were happening during the time when Mary Shelley was writing, right? We know of the Napoleonic Wars, uh, that took place from 1792 to 1815, right? So it's a series of conflict that took place between the French Empire under Napoleon, and the many different European countries, right? So during the Napoleonic Wars, millions of people lost their lives, right? uh, another event, right, where millions of people, where several people died, was the Mount Tempora, right? Mount Tempora, I've discussed in the class also, right? uh, in the year 1850, there was a volcano that erupted in Mount Tempora in Indonesia, right? And it is considered as the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history, right? So there was enormous dust cloud which drifted westward, right? And it caused a year without summer. So the year 1816 is known as the year without summer, right? Because of the volcanic eruption, right? So there was this constant rainfall, and the weather condition was very bad, right? It was badly affected, and because of which it also affected harvest. Uh, and around 2 lakh people starved to death, right? There was also a severe food riot that took place, right? And Switzerland, especially Switzerland, was very badly affected, right? So that is another depopulating event that took place. Another event is the cholera pandemic, right? That took place between 1817 and 1824, right? So these are all the events that took place uh, just before Mary Shelley wrote The Last Man, right? So again, this cholera pandemic occurred in 1817, right? And this is the first documented global outbreak of cholera, and it killed several millions of people, right? So again, because of all these depopulating events, right, human extinction was a possibility, right? And again, it is against all this context that Shelley wrote The Last Man. Uh, Also, several works, right, about a lone survivor, or the last man narrative, or the last man theme, came about at the same time, right? So the last man, one novel, right, the last man, written in 1805, was written by French writer John Baptiste Cousin, right? So it's a powerful story of the demise of human race, which was originally published in France in 1805, right? Then another poem uh, was written by Lord Byron, right? So Lord Byron was among the first English writers to delve into this theme, right? In 1816, through the publication of the short poem Darkness, right? So again, this poem is about the extinction of the sun and humanity's subsequent downfall, right? So after this, there were several other poems, right? The Last Man by Thomas Hood in 1826. Again, The Last Man by Thomas Campbell in 1823, right? So these are another examples of two other poems by the same title, right? The Last Man, right? One written in 1826 and the other was written in 1823, right? So um, Mary Shelley also, like her fellow writers, right, expresses an apocalyptic stance, right, towards this horror of, uh, the Napoleonic Wars, or the French Revolution, right? Uh, and as we know in The Last Man, it is all about, the complete eradication of humanity through a play, right? So this is the context, right? This is the background and the context against which Mary Shelley wrote The Last Man in 1826. Okay, so a little bit about the novel, right? So we know that the novel starts with an introduction, right? It was written the intro. So we have to remember two dates, right? One is the year 1818 and the other is the year 2073, right? So um, maybe you'll be asked about these dates in your internal assessment, right? So you need to remember the dates, right? So one is the year 1818. So it starts with an introduction, right? Uh, Written in the year 1818. So in this introductory part, right, the narrator stumbles upon an inscription on leaves in the Sibyl cave in Naples, right? And there were certain cryptic messages written on the leaves, right, which foretold events that that were yet to come, right? And the narrator interprets these messages, right, and he weaved into the narrative that unfolds after the introduction, and that interpretation is the story, right? Is the Last Man, the novel, The Last Man that that we have read, right? So um, so the first year of the story is 2073, right? So we know that the novel has three divided into three volumes, right? And the first year of the story is 2073, and it is set in England. uh, and uh, and also the story is told from the perspective of Lionel Verney. So Lionel Verney is the protagonist of the novel, right? Also, important thing to know is that The Last Man is a autobiographical literary tribute to her husband, uh, Percy Shelley, uh, and Lord Byron, and her other friends, right? The romantic circle, right? A circle of friends that she had, right? So the story, the novel is shaped by the events in Shelley's life, and also some of the historical events of Europe, right, during the 1810s and 1820s, like I have just mentioned in the previous slide, right? Uh, so her circle of romantic friends, right, or intellectuals, including her husband, Percy Shelley, they died very young, right? They died one by out because of several different causes, right? Along with several of their children. And we know that Mary Shelley herself lost three children in quick succession, right? And she was just left with one child in the end. And we see that all these are reflected and mirrored in the novel, right? So we know that Lionel Verney, who is the protagonist of the novel, he serves as a surrogate for the author, right? Uh, and he undergoes a transformation under the guidance of Adrian, right? So Adrian is representing Mary's husband, Percy, right? And then they have a companion called Raymond, right? And Raymond becomes the protector, right? Lord Protector of England. And he also played a very significant role in leading the Greek forces against the Turks, right? And we know that Raymond is a very clear reference to Lord Byron. Uh, and so, like I've mentioned, the novel is divided into three volumes, right? The first volume is a romantic narrative of six characters, right? We know of all the six characters, right? So it's all the romance that took place, right? The love stories of all these characters, right? Where Adrian Adrian falls in love with Evadne, but Evadne and Perdita, in fact, loved, Raymond, and then Raymond, in turn, loved Perdita, right? But then he thinks that he should marry Idris, who is the younger sister of Adrian, just for political gain, right? Then again, there is this love angle between Lionel and Idris, right? Idris and Lionel, right? And they fall in love. So eventually, what happens is, eventually Raymond marries Perdita, right? And they have a daughter called Clara. And then Lionel also eventually marries Idris, and together they have two children. Uh, and then Raymond. I'm talking about the first volume, right? So in the first volume, then Raymond becomes Lord Protector, and ultimately, you know what he does is he leaves to participate in the Greek Independence War, right? So that's all that happens in the first volume, right? Then second volume is more of a apocalyptic narrative of the plague, right? So. Um, we see that in the second volume, Raymond dies from, from an explosion, right, upon entering this plague-ridden Constantinople, right? And then his wife, Perdita, also, she kills herself, right, so that she can be buried next to Raymond in Greece, right? And so after they both died, Lionel and Clara both returned to England, and then by then in the second unit, the plague had already reached England, right? And then finally, the third volume is a post-apocalyptic narrative, right? It describes the end of humanity, where everyone dies one by one, leaving only Lionel Verney alone, and again, and it is in the year 2100 that he writes his memoir, right? So another year to remember is 2100, right? 2100. This is the year when he wrote his memoir, right? So okay, now let's discuss the themes of the uh, novel, right? So the themes that are explored in The Last Man uh, align with the themes of romanticism, right? The novel explores emotions such as hope, right? Hope, love, and the power of human imagination, right? Uh, so this hope is best exemplified by Lionel Verney, right, who is the lone survivor. Because throughout The Last Man, Lionel Verney maintains this unwavering sense of hope, right, despite facing immense adversity, right. So at the start of the novel, uh, we read that he was born into poverty, and also he became orphan at a very young age, and he had to take care of his sister Perdita, right. And so he really struggled to find hope in this very harsh surroundings, and harsh childhood, right, that he had. But however, when he met Adrian, right, Adrian, who is the Earl of Windsor, uh, Adrian sparks a newfound optimism within him, right? So Adrian's kindness and mentorship provided Lionel with hope for a better future, right? Also, after losing everyone very close and dear to him, when Lionel finds himself, alone in Rome, right? He writes about how he heard this whisper of hope, right, which prevented him from, succumbing to despair, right? And then he reminds us that, even in that very dire, severe condition, there is a chance for hope, and there is a chance for change, right? So his hope remains very steadfast, and drives him to, survive and seek companionship, right? um, so, throughout the novel, Lionel's source of strength is his sense of hope, which he regards as, as something that is very vital for human existence. And also, even as the last surviving human, when he was in Rome, if you remember, when he was in Rome, he kept ringing bells, right? Like ringing bells of each and every house, right? And admitting that despite being hopeless, he was still clinging to a certain kind of hope, right? He knew that there was no one, alive in Rome, right? When he was living in Rome. So remember, he lived in Rome for 1 year, right? So during that 1 year also, he never lost hope, right? Though he used to feel sad at times, right? But he never lost hope, and then he kept looking for companion, right? Hoping for a companion, right? Hoping that at least someone would be alive out there, right? So in that hope, right, he kept, you know uh, you know uh, ringing bells of each and every house, right, in that deserted city. So this very hope, right, became his lifeline, sustaining him through the darkest moments. And this hope, however small or faint, kept him going. And he also mentions clearly that without hope, survival for him would have been impossible, right? So there is this theme of hope. Then another theme that we see is the is love, right? So love, of course, we know in the Last Man, all the main characters, they experience profound love for each other, right? So uh, one is the Lionel Verney's love and bond with Adrian, right? So it is marked by gratitude, affection, right? So there's this kind of a platonic love that existed between Adrian and Verney, right? They had deep love, respect, uh, affection for each other, right? Then we also know of Adrian's, unrequited love for Evadne, right? So he fell in love with Evadne, who was a Greek princess, but Evadne did not reciprocate his love, right? And because of that, uh, he was on the brink of illness, right? Until he found solace, in the support of Lionel, Perdita, and Idris, right? uh, and also we know of the deep love between Lionel and Idris, right? When Idris was not Idris, sorry, Lionel and Lionel and Idris, right? So when Lionel was sick, right, when he contracted the plague, right, it was Idris who nursed him back to health, right? And so we see the deep love and affection that exists between Lionel and Idris as well, right? And also another uh, love that existed between Perdita and Raymond, right? So we know that Raymond initially he wanted to marry Idris, right? Idris, who is the younger sister of Adrian, right? Just in the hope that uh, maybe, right, because Idris is the daughter of the last monarch of England, right? So he thought that maybe if he married Idris, he had a chance of becoming the monarch, right? In case monarchy was restored, right? So that was his ambition. So he wanted to marry Idris for his own political gain, right? But then he eventually fell in love with Idris, right? Uh, and that is how his love for Perdita outweighed his ambition, right? And also we know of how Perdita was also deeply in love with Raymond, right? And so when Raymond died in Constantinople, right? She could not think of living without him. So what he did was she ultimately committed suicide so that she also could be buried next to him in Greece, right? So that theme of love also is a very important theme in the novel, right? Then imagination, right? Another theme is that of imagination, right? So like I mentioned earlier, the Last Man embodies this spirit of romanticism, right? Through its celebration of imagination. uh, we know how almost all characters in the novel, they have a very powerful and creative imagination. And through several instances throughout the novel, Shelley explores this multifaceted nature of imagination, right, which is capable of evoking both happiness and also anguish, right? For example, the narrator Lionel Verney, he praises Raymond's powerful imagination, right? So he recognized that, you know, Raymond has a very strong and powerful imagination, uh, and that he has that potential to rule the world, right? If only he was not hindered by his emotions, right? Which, of course, he succumbed to it later towards the end, not towards the end, in the, in fact, in the very start, right? In the very first unit, right? When he fell in love, or not really in love, but then he felt that he felt guilty for uh, Ivane, right? So that is how um, mm, the relationship between Raymond and Perdita was strained, right? Because of his uh, affection for Ivane, right? So we know of another instance, as Lionel was, desperately searching for Raymond in Constantinople, right? When Raymond had gone to, fight for the Greek War of Independence, and he did not return back, right? So it was Perdita and Lionel who had gone to Constantinople in search of Raymond, right? So when Lionel was, desperately searching for Raymond in Constantinople, uh, since he was driven by this intense longing to, find his friend, Lionel's imagination conjured up, image or a vision of Raymond, right? So he reflected on this moment and acknowledges that, it provided him with a very brief respite, right? uh, and this brief respite or happiness was provided by his imagination's ability to conjure up this very comforting illusion, right? Illusion of Raymond, right? But we know that it was just his imagination, right? Though it was just his imagination, but then it somehow was able to provide him with some kind of respite, right? So this was all the power of imagination, right? And then we have another instance when Adrian, after, enduring severe illness in Scotland, he was finally nursed back to health by Verney, right? So when Adrian's love was not reciprocated by Ivane, right? He fell ill. Yeah, he went into depression. He fell ill, and he was sick in Scotland, right? So it was Adrian who had gone to uh, look after Adrian and also bring him back to health, right? So after he recuperated, and when he was returning back home with Adrian, with Lionel, Adrian, he praised the power of imagination, right? And then he shares with Lionel, right, that his belief that how imagination is a very remarkable gift, which is capable of, stripping reality of its dullness, right, and has this very transformative ability to shape reality according to its whims, right? So that is what Adrian tells Lionel, right, when he was returning home uh, to England, right? Uh, so those are some examples of the power of imagination, right? Then also another theme of romanticism is nature, right? We know of that. So Mary Shelley, writing in this romantic style, uh, portrays nature as a symbol of a constant, right? A constant that never changed amidst the devastation that was brought about by this pandemic, right? By this plague. So we know how all the characters in the novel, right? If you read, they are always filled with reverence for the natural world, right? Throughout the novel, you will see that characters they find solace and inspiration in nature. Uh, Particularly in the forest at Windsor, right, which Lionel describes as, adorned with leaves and flowers, and when it snowed, it was very beautiful, in white. The forest was white and beautiful, right? So he described, Lionel describes about the beauty of the Windsor forest, right? Uh, and also he attributes feelings of, happiness, love, peace, right, to the forest itself. also talking about the positive influence of nature on their lives, right? um then another instance would be when again, like the same thing, when Adrian was recovering from illness in Scotland, right? And as he was returning back to England, right? uh, Along with talking about the power of imagination and what a gift imagination was, he also marveled at the beauty of nature, right? He did that at length, right? That about the beauty of nature, right? uh, uh, Again, you will see that when Lionel and his family was traveling to Alps, right? To seek refuge from the plague. When now several survivors, right? They from England, they had gone to Italy and France to seek refuge, right? Then you will see that survivors, they were dying, and then from 1500 to became 500 to 1000, 600, to 200, 300. So the number of people, it became lesser and lesser, right? And finally, when they reach Alps, right, uh to seek refuge from the plague, we see how Lionel was marveling at the beauty of the majestic mountains, right? The Alps, right? So the and he talks about how the sight of the beauty of the nature brought comfort to the survivors, right? And they also found solace in the beauty of the natural world, right? uh, so much so that Verney believed that they have reached a very fitting place for them to die, right? So he writes how, I think that was in the third volume. Of course, it was in the third volume, the last chapter, if I'm not wrong. He talks about how they have reached Alps, and then it is a very fitting place. It's a perfect place for them to die, right? Because the place was the mountains, right? It was they were so beautiful that he thought that it was a perfect place that they had come to die, right? So, throughout the novel, you would see how the beauty of nature or the natural world, continue to console them even in the darkest moments, right? Uh, along that same line, right? Uh, by rejecting the notion of humanity as the central focus or the center of the universe, right? And also by challenging our assumed superiority over nature, the last man, what it does is it kind of presents a significant critique of Western humanism, right? As natural world exists for its own sake, right, and not for the uses of humanity, right? So we see that nature and the beauty of nature was not affected by the play, right? In the novel, right? So nature existed for its own sake and not for the humans, right? Also we see how animals, right, animals remain unaffected, right? Also the buildings, the infrastructure, all this remain unaffected, leaving the humans or the survivors to just wander through these towns, the empty deserted towns and fields, right? Where Shelley writes about how these deserted towns and fields were uh, uh, filled with this livestock, right? Because they were just roaming in the fields and towns unattended, right? Because they were also not affected, right? So it is also the novel also challenges Western humanism in that sense, right? Also, another theme is the theme of survival, or loneliness, alienation, right? So it is important to know Shelley's mental state of mind, right, during the writing of the Last Man, right? So Shelley started writing the Last Man in 1824. That was 6 years after her husband Percy Shelley died in a boating accident, right? So the novel resonates with Mary Shelley's profound grief over the loss of her children, husband, and her friends, right? And throughout the period, right, leading up to the publication of the novel in 1826, Mary Shelley seemed to find no happiness, right? Also, Shelley's journey as a mother was filled with, sorrow and illness, right? Because uh, all her children died in their infancy, and it was just one child, right? It was only one child that reached adulthood, as the remaining children died in infancy, right? Also, we know that Mary Shelley is the daughter of Mary Wollstonecraft, and Mary Wollstonecraft passed away just 10 days after Shelley's birth, right? So it is the depth of her isolation, right? The loneliness was further compounded by the loss of, again, the loss of her community and her friends, right? The romantic circle of friends, right? That had, maybe previously provided her with solace before their death, right? So we know uh, how Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley, they belong to a circle of friends called the romantics, right? The second generation of romantics, right? The Keats, Shelley, Byron, they were part of this second generation of romantics, right? And most of them, they died before reaching middle age, right? So Shelley wrote this Last Mans as a means to cope with her profound grief, and also to write you know about Percy Shelley. Okay, it's also a way of writing about Percy Shelley without actually violating the terms that was set by her father-in-law. So we know that uh, Percy Shelley's father had prohibited Mary Shelley from writing anything about Percy Shelley's life, right? So she could not do that, and she was also facing financial constraints. So this novel, right, it was a way of, uh, paying tribute to her friends as well as Percy Shelley, and also uh, avoiding, right, the violation of the terms that was set by her father-in-law, right? Because the novel, right, it's the idealistic and the philosophical character, that is Adrian, right? It was a romanticized portrayal of Percy Shelley, right? In a way, she was able to write about Percy Shelley, not directly but indirectly, right? In that way, she did not violate the terms that was set by her father-in-law, right? uh, Right. Then solidarity, right? The theme of solidarity, fraternity, and altruism, right? So also, again, we know that as the plague infiltrated England, right? The government was unprepared, and because of which they faced societal disintegration, right? So hold on. Sorry. Yeah. So we know that initial phase, right, when the plague infiltrated England, right? Several individuals, they started withdrawing into their homes, and they started isolating themselves, right? So also we know of how uh, the government was deserted by Raymond, no, sorry, what was his name? Ryland, right? The leader Ryland, right? Who was elected to be the Lord Protector of England. But Lord Ryland, what he did was, because of the fear of, contracting the plague, he gave up the position of Lord Protector, right? And it was subsequently, this government was saved by Adrian and Verney, as they, sought to assist and help the poor, offering them with medical aid and all that, right? uh, and also when this plague reached Italy and France, right, there were several immigrants that had come to England, right? And it was Lionel and his family that took care of all these people, right, that had come this immigrants, right? They had come, they took care of them at Windsor, right? And also we see that in Shelley's narrative, right, there is this clear distinction that emerges between selfishness and selflessness, right? So one example of selfishness has to do with that sect in Paris, right, that was led by this self-proclaimed prophet, right, who guaranteed hell to his followers, right? And so this blind followers, they believe that the prophet was going to save them from the plague, right? But eventually we know how all of them died in during the epidemic, right? uh, Another example Shelley provides is example of selflessness uh, is in the village of Little Marlow, right? So despite being ravaged by this epidemic, Little Marlow, that's a village, right? Little Marlow transformed into a utopia, right, where people supported each other, right? So it was not that that was not taking place there, that was still inevitable, but the community there, they were not living in fear and misery, right? So we see how in little the village Little Marlow, there was this old lady called Martha, right? And she exemplified the quality of selflessness, right? uh, as to the other characters, like uh, Adrian, uh, Bernie, right? All of these characters, they prioritize, selflessness or altruism over their personal fears and concerns, right? So, uh, this village, the Little Marlow, right? The village therefore exemplifies, this utopian model of communal form of living, right? Where there was this uh, friendship, solidarity, and fraternity among the community members, right? So those are some themes that are explained in the that are explored in the novel, right? Then so we know that dystopian fiction, as I've mentioned, it is often a cautionary tale, right? So what are the cautionary, reminder or warnings that Shelley has given us through her novel? So we know that though the novel is about the collapse of humanity, right? Yet within the narrative, we also encounter examples showcasing the power of, smaller communities and the importance of solidarity, brotherhood and human connection. As I've just mentioned, right, when the village of Little Marlow, and how Adrian, how Vernie, and even Idris, how did she die? Idris died helping, trying to help the an old mother and a daughter, right? So uh, all these people, right, they how they exemplify this exemplify this quality of uh, solidarity, fraternity, and all that, right? um, so it talks about the importance of community, brotherhood, and connection, right? uh, Also in the book, some people, they make this very dedicated effort to safeguard the communities, right? Again, like the uh, how the old lady Martha, right? Old lady Martha, how she assumed leadership, right, in the village Marlow, and how she provided provisions, how she provided food and medical care to the community members, right? Shelley's book provides insight into how and why we might choose to live uh, a life differently, right? How we can live our lives, uh, differently in the aftermath of pandemic, right? So how we know that as the pandemic escalated in England, there was disorder and anarchy, right? There were unattended corpses everywhere. There was violence. There was invading, forces, and widespread panic everywhere, right? And also the Republican England was also crumbling, right? So this illustrates England's failure to effectively address the existential problems that were posed by the pandemic, right? Uh, and so this aspect of the story, uh, So when you read the novel, right, so from today's perspective, right, when we actually have gone through a pandemic, right, so the particular aspect of the story that resonates most, right, with us modern readers, right, is how society reacts to plague, right. There are several scenes in the novel that mirror the, you know, present day events, right, how we also responded or reacted in the same manner as the characters in the novel were responding, right. So in the novel, people in England, they initially viewed the plague as a something that was happening in, and far away land, right. And so they were downplaying the severity, right. But the concern only arose when the plague actually began to disrupt trade and, and also cause economic distress, right. So uh, also we know that there was this refugee crisis, right, that was brought about by the pandemic, right, by the plague in England, right. uh, uh, and it is more the interpersonal and the international conflicts, uh, rather than the advancement in science and technology, right. We know that this novel, right, there is very less technological representation, or the technology is very, it's not at all futuristic, right, in the novel, right. So it is not about the advancement in science and technology, right. But it is the conflicts, right, the international conflicts. uh, those are the key elements that were driving the narrative forward, right. uh, and also Shelley highlighted the social and political issues that were arising from humanity's selfish and indifferent attitude, right. uh, so what has the last man, right, what has Shelley through the last man taught us, right. uh, Overall, the last man prompts us to reflect on humanity's capacity for both destruction and resilience. And also, the novel warns us against unchecked human action, blind faith, uh, consequences of, societal divisions or, disunity, and urges us to contemplate on the importance of unity, community, selflessness, right, in times of adversity, right. So those are some of the important, warnings that Mary Shelley provides us with in the novel. What's the time? I think it's I think I am left with some 7 minutes. So if there are any questions, but then I don't know if students. Hello? 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 I'm done with the presentation. So what shall I do now? Shall I just stop sharing and leave the meeting, or Hello.